I have owned the Alpha 7R Mark V for about 2 years. I got this when it first came out of December 2022. We're now in 2025, so I got a good use of it. I got 2 years of use of it. And I think it's appropriate time because it gave me so much time to not only just experience this camera in the photo perspective, but also videos. I will do a disclaimer, I'm not really good in videography. I am learning, I am taking the time to learn more about what goes into making videos. But of course, in perspective, this camera is a photo first camera, as the R series within the Sony Alpha series the R stands for resolution. So it is an image first camera. But ironically, this camera is weirdly a hybrid camera, because when we look into the specs, this camera's stacked for its video specs. And a lot of people were kind of taken back by that. So with that being said, let's jump into the specs. So spec-wise, when we look into the perspective of photos first, this camera is stacked with a 61 megapixel sensor. So in other words, that's a really high resolution image in my opinion. And I think right now there's only a few cameras that have a 61 megapixel sensor. I think some of them are like Hasselblad. No, Hasselblad is a higher megapixel. I think right now it is, I think the Sony Alpha 1 Mark II, Leica Q3 43, and I think that's all I can think of right now. So there's not a lot that's on top of my head. With a 61 megapixel sensor, it offers a very wide dynamic range. I think it's about 15 stops. For those who don't know what dynamic range is, it is the measurement between the brightest part of the image to the darkest part of the image. And then color actually is just 100%. I've never seen a color shift on this camera. Only time I've ever seen it is when I do like an ND filter, like a cheap ND filter that goes on top of it. There's like a weird yellow tint, so then I gotta adjust the white balance. But even without that, like I've never seen like inaccurate colors. And I've been to places that are very colorful that, you know, like I haven't seen that shift at all. Another thing is that it is, for autofocus phase detection points, it's about 693. So 693 points, apologies. So that means that you're not really gonna lose, there's so much space to kind of keep focus, so you're not gonna lose your focusing point. Along the conversation of autofocus, the 7R Mark V is equipped with the AI focusing system. I don't know the proper name they use for it, but pretty much what it says is that it uses the AI chip to kind of predict what your subject's going to do. So it will lock on your subject and it will predict its movements if it ever gets if it gets blocked by something, or it walks behind a wall, or let's say you're photographing a bird, it will predict the bird's movement to see how it flies. And so that way it keeps focus on your subject and you don't have to worry about like anything disrupting it in a sense. I've seen it done in first place, I've seen it happen in my perspective when I was doing a wedding one time. I kept having people walk in front of my camera, even though I told them politely to go around me. But I was taking a photo of the bride and one guy walked right in front of my camera, but I noticed the green little tracking dot stayed on the bride. And the minute I told the guy like, hey, you're in my shot, and he moved, it still correctly stayed on the eye. And that's another thing, it has a real-time autofocusing system, so you can see it happen. You don't see a matter of delay, it just right there and then. When we dive into videos, this is where I'm saying like, this is kind of a video camera. The 7R Mark V can shoot up to 4K at 422 10-bit. So that means there's more room for color range, and this is not seen in a lot of 7R series, so this is kind of the first. Along with that, it can shoot at 8K at 420 at 10-bit, so there's still color range, but a little bit less. At 8K, it does do at a more of a crop, so you lose kind of like some ratio. It has S-Log3, S-Log2, and the S-Cinetone. I usually do S-Log3, but S-Cinetone looks amazing. Along with that, it can also shoot, I think, 120 frames per second when you use the slow and quick setting. So if you're doing a lot of like slow motion or time lapse, it can do that. And so, like I said, this camera is not a video camera. It's image first, but Sony stacked it with such great video capabilities. It kind of makes you think like it should have just been a hybrid camera. So this overall, like I said, this camera with its capabilities, it became my workhorse camera. And of course, there are other cameras, because I'm coming from an Alpha 7 Mark II. Like I got that in 2016 and I had it until 2022. So, you know, your obvious question is, why didn't you just pick a different camera? Why this one? So the thing is that I wanted to make a jump to something that was kind of a hybrid camera to a very image first camera, but still have great video capabilities in case there's a moment that requires it. However, now that I own an FX3, if I ever find myself in a scenario where I need a video content to be made, I have that to rely on. But I still rely on my 7R Mark V, because when I do travel, I can't take both sometimes because I have to lighten my load. But overall, I wanted a camera that had the capabilities of doing both. I used the example of the wedding. I needed a camera to make sure that if something were to go, not wrong, but like something were to disrupt me while I was like trying to get focus on the subject, I wouldn't lose focus. So that AI feature comes in handy. One of the things I really was so like, I wouldn't say adamant about, but I really like, is crucial for me, is dual card slots. But also I'm now in the CF Express A family system. I don't know how to explain it, but I use a lot of CF Express A's, and 7R Mark V has 2 slots for them. So that's kind of handy, so I don't have to constantly switch SD cards. Then again, I was coming from the Alpha 7 Mark II, which only has 1, but my point is that I can use faster writing and readout cards rather than a standard SD card. Another of that is that I needed a camera kind of to produce high quality images no matter how much I cropped them. And that's the one thing I loved about the 61 megapixel sensor. If you were to crop that image so many times, you don't lose details in your image. And I've seen it done so many times where I'm like cropping and cropping and cropping, and the image still stays crystal clear. Because there are scenarios where I'm far away and I can't capture the subject I want to capture. So I have to crop my image, and being the fact that it's 61 megapixels, I don't lose resolution. The camera also has the capabilities of doing a crop sensor, so you can change your full frame into like an APS-C. What's nice about that is that you don't lose resolution. Well, you do, but like you don't go down really like low. You start off at 61, and then when you do the Super 35, it goes from 61 to 31. That's still a high resolution image. I mean, when you post on Instagram, you only need like 8 megapixels of an image to post on Instagram these days. So that's kind of a plus. And also it helps when I'm using a telephoto lens and the computation of being far away from my subject. If I do an APS-C mode, it changes like my 70 into like, I think a 90, I believe. I'm doing the math wrong, but that's the thing. It does a crop magnification on my focal length. So it now, that 70 becomes a 90, and then the 200 becomes, I think, like a 350 or something like that. So I wanted a camera that can take a scenario I'm in where I'm dealing with something farther away, I'm dealing with crowded people, I'm dealing with, I don't know, a scenario where I need to stack my camera with multiple SD cards. I needed something that can do that. And when that 7R Mark V came to the market and showed this lineup of specs, part of me was like, that's what I need. And so yeah, I jumped the gun from the 7 Mark II all the way to this model because I was in a scenario where I needed a very powerful tool. And this camera is it. Although there are a few cons, I will dive into it. But when you compare this camera to the latest ones that came out, like the ZVE1, the ZVE10, the Alpha 9 Mark III, the Alpha 1 Mark II, these cameras that came out, the foundation for those cameras are from the 7R Mark V. It's the same, AI system that's in here. It's the same almost sensor in the Alpha 1 Mark II as well. Not the Alpha 9 Mark III because it's a different sensor, but it's like some of the same. But anyways, this is the blueprint. This is the foundation and I wouldn't be surprised. This is the reason why other feature cameras have certain specs, certain features, because this laid that foreground, or I guess the path for these cameras to kind of lead its way. What's that saying? Like, this camera ran, so those ones walked. And that's pretty much what it is, Although this camera is great, there are a few cons that I have noticed. And I guess this is like a perfect time to just transition to that. But the first con is that although it performs pretty okay in low light, due to its high resolution sensor, you do see more noise than you would on a lower megapixel camera. Like I said, it does perform well, but certain scenarios, I noticed that the shadows, you start to see some of that noise build up. Of course, Lightroom AI denoise is my best friend in scenarios like that, so it has not been a problem, but it is if I have to give someone raw files. So it's kind of like, ooh. Secondly, when you're switching between video and photo, there is a lag, and I think it's because it's changing its aspect ratio, but also it's, adjusting to the settings I have on my camera. The only way I was able to solve that is when I turn off my camera, then I switch it and turn it back on. So I don't use it a whole lot of switching. If I need to do video, I wait for the right moment, then film. Excuse me. The third one, but there is a bigger solution for that, is file size. Because you're doing a 61 megapixel, the file size are much bigger. However, inside the camera, you can adjust that raw file size to be smaller. So you can go from uncompressed, no loss data, to compress, or lossless compress. There are 4 different settings, I believe, that you can make that adjustment. So there's a workaround that, file size issue. And then lastly, I know when it comes down to video, I think some people have said, I haven't noticed it myself, but people have said that hey, the dynamic range on the video is not that great, which makes sense. Like I said, this camera's not supposed to be a video camera, but it has functionalities and specs of a good video camera. But I know the sensor itself doesn't perform like an FX3 or FX30 or FX6 or even an Alpha 7S Mark III. So people have said that it's you don't have a lot of data to work with as you would. But of course, that's, like I said, this camera's not a video camera. It's stacked like it is, but it's not entirely. And then lastly, I think the only one issue I have, and this is a personal issue for me, is that I wish I had the ergonomic trigger that the Alpha 9 Mark III and the Alpha 1 Mark II has, because that's so nice to have that curve. That's just me personally. But other than that, this camera is a great camera. It's perfect for portrait photographers due to its high resolution sensors. It's perfect for wildlife photographers, because if you can't get close to an animal, you can crop and still keep the data. It's good for sports photographer. Although it does 10 frames per second, you're still shooting at a higher resolution, so your images are gonna be crisp and clean. Also, I think 10 frames per second can do about 536 raw photos and 1,000 JPEGs. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's the math of it until it starts to lag. And then also if you're into journalism, this is also a good camera, because like I said, if you the able to just crop an image and still not lose image is perfect. If you want to get into videos, but you still want to do photos at the same, this is also a good camera to do it, especially if you want something with a little bit more up-to-date camera technology. I do think this is overall a good camera. Could be good for everyone. Of course, I know, the flagship cameras like the 1 and the 9 have, their perspective. Like the 9 is really good for sports because it can shoot at 120 frames per second. It also has pre-capture, which I wish this camera had. I would never want to buy another camera if this has it. But overall, those flagship cameras are meant specifically for certain people. And then this one, I feel like is a well-rounded camera. In fact, the way I feel like people see the Alpha 7 Mark IV, how it's a well-rounded camera for everyone, I think this Alpha 7 Mark V is that, but just with a bigger price point. That's another con. This thing is about $3,400, so it is pricey, but if you're looking to upgrade to something that is with the latest and greatest, and you can't pay the $6,000 that the 1 Mark II and the 9 Mark III goes for, this is it, But like I said, this camera has done so many things for me. It's been everywhere. It's captured such great images. I mean, these 2 images right behind me, if you can see, Iceland and Japan, those were caught on my Alpha 7 Mark V. So, if there's a camera you're looking for and you want something that's well-rounded, this is it. This is it. It is bigger, I would say though, but I think the gripping is much better. So if you have a big hand, that's a plus for you. But I hope this video is helpful. I hope it kind of breaks down some questions that you had for this model. Because I think this camera is now getting the recognition it deserves. When it first came out, it was okay, you know, because there was other models that were more a little bit worthy and all that. But I think now with the Alpha 1 Mark II and the Alpha 9 Mark III, people are realizing like 6,000 is a lot for me. I don't think I could afford it. They're now looking at this model because this camera is the blueprint for those cameras. This is the foundation of it. So, you know, I wouldn't be surprised that this will like blow up sooner or later. But other than that, this is the perfect camera for me. Hopefully it's a perfect camera for you. If not, that's fine. You know, it's okay. It's not everyone's cup of tea. But like and subscribe. Comment down what you want to know more about this camera. I wish I can spend a whole hour talking about it, but it's just great. Other than that, I have to edit this video because I want to post it the following day. So this is where we're gonna end off. Thanks for joining. See you later.